welcome everybody to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists look at gaming through a feminist lens, and indeed the other way around sometimes as well. So what we're going to be talking about today is another look at witches in gaming. And in our first episode on the topic, we kind of covered the tropes that you find when you think about witches in our culture generally, and also in the media, which gaming is very much a part of. And we talked about the particular witches that we remembered, how those fit into those tropes, and the ideas of the threat of witches to men in general because of their power, and the idea that that doesn't sit right with the patriarchy and that it should be got rid of. But in this episode, we're going to be looking at different perceptions of witchcraft and what being a witch means. And when I talk about that, what I'm saying is more in terms of thinking about how the witch is connected to the natural world and nature, and looking after the planet, I suppose, and being in touch with the different rhythms of how the natural world operates and that kind of thing. And I guess looking at how there might be some witches that fit that description within gaming. I can think of one in particular, and I'm sure Matt can as well. And I'm sure Jem, hopefully you can as well. And then what I think we'll cover is just generally the ideas of whether there's ever a good witch, and is that a character that you've seen in gaming, I guess. So I think when we think about magic and witchcraft and witches, magical women, I suppose, being in touch with nature and a protector of that nature and perhaps a balance, one character I think of is definitely Freya from God of War, because of course she was very protective of her woods, and had a lot of friends from the natural world, or at least initially that you thought were just things like it's not a pig, it's a what's the other one that I'm trying to think of? The boar, who you thought initially was just a boar, but turns out it's not just a boar. There's a creature that can transform into a human and back again, I suppose. Although,
yes.
I suppose it's not a human if they can transform into a boar. But but she has a lot of creatures who she's friends with. She's obviously in touch with that side of things and communicating with the natural world. She has a lovely garden where she plants a lot of her, I suppose, magical herbs. You can see that immediately when we're first introduced, she's using lots of those herbs as a medicinal treatment to heal. So in terms of power and how it is used, she's using her powers to heal and to be a mother character. And that theme is very strong throughout the entirety of God of War, about familial relationships and mothers and fathers and all that sort of thing as well. But yeah, that's one of the best depictions, I think, of a healing, motherly kind of witch, which I think is definitely more positive than a witch that's old and haggard and using her magic to look young and beautiful and craves that youthfulness and that immortality, I suppose. So yeah, what do you guys think about that side of things?
I think that again, the having female characters that one of their defining aspects is having children. But I think Freya is different to that trope because she's a god first, and all tales of gods for thousands and thousands of years is they're all families. There's Zeus and the Titans, his parents were Titans, and Kratos is his son, and Zeus just shagged everything that moved. It's all weird family stuff. And with Freya, she It's never. She's not a god of. She is the god of the Vanir. She is the queen of the Vanir. She's the queen of the Valkyries. She is a god, but she's not. It's not clear exactly what she's a god of. But all of her stuff does seem to be around nature. And it's interesting the way that she interacts. She interacts with nature. So first off, you find her. She's got her lovely boar friend. And she's got her lovely house with Charlie.
Yeah.
And she saves Atreus' life and resurrects Mimir, even though she hates him. So that shows the nurture side. But she when she uses her powers, she abuses them and exploits them for her own. She is selfish in areas. She is extremely selfish because it's her fault that Balder has turned out the way he does. She used her magic to. I don't know whether this was. So in the original Norse story, she spoke to all. She spoke to all the all the plants and all the flowers, saying that and swear that you won't hurt my son. But in this, I don't know what that what version of that they've got, but she uses that knowledge to take Balder's feeling, to take away his life, because she was too scared to lose him, and she loses him anyway, and just spends 100 years in misery without her son, and then her son hating her. And then you see when she's obsessed with vengeance in the second game, she fucking abandoned Charlie. She left her big, beautiful tortoise house to freeze in Fimbulwinter. And she uses at the very start, when Kratos and Atreus are almost at the protection stave, she brings the entire mountain down on them, and she's destroying trees. And when Atreus goes to speak to her, she uses thorny bushes. And she exploits nature for her own selfish needs, and then that just keeps that circle of, she creates her own torment through abusing her power. And I think she's definitely one of the best characters of women with magical powers, because women they're normally either they're good, they have to be good, they're either evil, cackling, bad, or they're quite safe and pleasant and good. Whereas Freya is incredibly flawed. Flaws are what make us interesting, and she plays that so well. Such an interesting character.
I agree, definitely. Jem, from your perspective, I know you haven't played. You've not played God of War, have you? I'm trying to think.
No,
you haven't. What about I think a similar line of thinking, the Druids, or playing as a Druid in Baldur's Gate? Do you feel like that?
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really pleased that you said that, because that's what I was thinking. I was thinking, well, the concept of a witch is a very broad and undefined term in a lot of ways. So yeah, I would say that the Druids in Baldur's Gate in D&D definitely would count as witches, in that they use nature magic to fight and live and all of that, and yeah, I mean, there absolutely are male druids, but I think that to me they are closer to how I believe a sort of real witch would be, and they have a sort of deep respect for balance and nature, and an understanding of the, nature red in tooth and claw, an understanding of the fact that violence is part of that world, which makes them really interesting when we're talking about these kind of extreme characters, these either very goody two shoes like Glinda uh, oh my gosh,
Wizard of Oz, is it?
Wizard of
Yeah.
Oz. Yes, Glinda and Wizard of Oz. When she's just like so perfect, which is, but if you've read or seen Wicked, then you'll know she's not so.
True.
But but there's this sort of like very pretty cutesy little witchy thing going on over here, or there's like your evil hag like the one in Baldur's Gate over there, and there's kind of like they're very extreme, and I think that the druid sort of characters fit in nicely in the middle of that, and they to me relate more closely to what I would believe like a real witch would be, in if we had them in the real world. I do know a few, so I know that we do have them in the real world. So I think that's really interesting, and I think that I'm always really drawn to those characters for that reason, because I think that especially as the sort of climate crisis becomes more prevalent for people in their day-to-day lives, this idea of a connection to the natural world and sort of creating magic through that connection is very alluring and very positive, actually, because I do think that we can create magic, not sort of like the big sparkly in your face magic, but I believe that by connecting to the natural world we can create bonds and improve our well-being and our environments in ways that are magical, really. So yeah, so I think definitely the druids, and then I think also um I was actually thinking about the three sisters from Resident Evil Village, the village, because there are these there is sort of a, I mean, they're not good at all, but there is a sort of interesting interplay there with with those characters, and how they, I don't know if they are sisters really, but they're basically sort of vampiric succubi, but they are witchy. There's definitely a witchy thing, and I mean, they fall into the more traditional um ideas. I think it's interesting how we um take these tropes and then try and mix them up and make them into something new, so that it looks like we're being so like cool and edgy. I'm reading a book at the moment called Dodo, which is by Neil Stevenson and someone else whose name eludes me, but it's about time travel, um, and witches and the loss of magic. And it has one of the best explanations of how magic works that I have ever come across, because it's always been, one of my sort of bugbears, that when you actually think about, well, how does this actually work, you either end up with people that are super powerful and could just basically rule the world in a click of their fingers, or it literally just doesn't make any sense at all. It's like, there has to be some payoff, but this is all about the sort of multiverse, really, and taking stuff, being able to move stuff between one and the other. And the witches in that, this magic only goes down the female line, for the most part. And even if it goes down the male line, it only appears in the females, and that's been really interesting. But the first thing that the witch that they find in that does is make herself look young and beautiful. So
Yeah.
even then, even in a scenario where it's they are really sort of like trying to be much more contemporary in their approach to it, they still dragged up that old trope. But I don't know. I mean, if we were all magical, would we be able to? Would we just make ourselves look good? I don't know.
One to think about, definitely. Yeah. I was thinking about how when we think about witches, it's always rooted in like fantasy and fairy tale and that kind of genre as a whole. And when you think about the games we've talked about, they're all fantasy games, and there's quite a rich amount of fantasy games available to play. Some of you might be saying, oh, well, Star Wars isn't fantasy, it's sci-fi, but I'd argue actually it's just fantasy in space, because you've got good and evil, and then a balance is the force. Like we've talked about magic and witches and the druids bringing balance to things, and I think that's definitely lots of themes run through Star Wars, so it's just fantasy in space, you could argue. But are there any witches outside of fantasy genre that we can even think of in the entire collection of culture about witches? I mean, I think it's pretty hard to move outside of fantasy myself, but it's just a question that occurred to me about whether that magic is rooted in like fairy tale and fantasy and can't be seen outside of that. And that's probably why there's a lot of misconceptions around it, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, my perspective on stuff like this is gaming provides an excellent sort of separation point for them, because most of the game, so say Dragon Age and Mass Effect, they are made by the same developers. You've got fantasy, which is bows and arrows and staffs, and then you've got sci-fi, which is technology and special, still powers, but they're rooted in technology. And there's Skyrim and there's Fallout. There's a point at which magic is replaced by science, but the outcome is the same. It's about power, and there's pre-technology power, which is magic, and then there's post-technology power, which is technology. And so it really does depend on how we define witches, because if you just say it's a woman with preternatural power, then you can say things like certainly some of the characters in Mass Effect in particular. There is another kind of magic which I think needs to be brought up at the minute, because it's being quite a flashpoint in American football terms. Is have either of you seen what Taylor Swift's been up to? The NFL.
I don't think I have. No. You'll have to explain.
Kansas City Chiefs, which is my team, they're one of their players he's the highest paid player in his position in the league. He's called Travis Kelce, and he's a nice guy, very fun, very funny, excellent. And he's been dating Taylor Swift this year, and it started off. She's been in the crowd in the Kelce box in pretty much every game this season, and it started off like the cameras watching the game noticed, is that Taylor Swift in the Kelce box? And then so every time Travis Kelce turned out, oh yeah, they're dating, and then every time they score, Travis scores, they point up to Taylor Swift and she's going there. And looking at the reactions to it, there's obviously the slew of men just hating her, saying she's ruining football. But that just is boring standard men hating women. But it's awesome because she's a billionaire. There's nothing anyone can do to touch her in any way. So you hating her makes absolutely no difference to her. That's power. Literally, no man can have power over her in any way. So that upsets men for one thing. But then you've got people going, "Oh yeah, it doesn't matter. She's just there at a football game enjoying herself." But then the magic part is that there are millions of young girls who are watching football for the first time just because they might see her in the crowd. And that's millions of young girls who might go, "Oh, I want to watch the entire game," so that when she shows up, they go, "Oh, how does it work?" And the biggest thing is, so football is always been seen, as with a lot of sports, is it's the biggest fans and most fans are men, even though that's changing and tons of women love football. But this is an opportunity for fathers to properly bond with their daughters, because the norm might normally be the father goes and sits and watches football on a Sunday afternoon and he's just sat there on his own. And now his daughter might come running in and be sat on the sofa next to him going, "Oh, what's happening? What's going on? Oh my God, it's Taylor Swift. Can we watch some more?" And she is giving, that's an incredible opportunity for men to bond with their daughters. And that's magic. That's a kind of, if we broaden what we're thinking of witches as being, that's really touched me recently.
Or are you actually saying that Taylor Swift has made a pact with the devil and is in fact a witch? I love Taylor Swift, and I think it's really great, actually, everything that's going on there. And I think, what's been really nice is I've seen so many articles about how Travis is just very happy to be with this woman who is infinitely more influential than he is. And he doesn't seem threatened by that, and it's kind of like, yeah, it's all good, and she's supporting him and he's supporting her. And I think that it's really nice to see such a high profile couple, currently at least, and for us, exhibiting such kind of like positive relationship roles. And I think that's really good, because we do definitely need to see more of that, because there's so much sort of negative stuff out there. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point about the power of
positive influence,
yeah.
I suppose.
Positive influence, yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And there's also it's a massive deal that...
Oh my God, you heard it here first. Swiftcraft. That's what we should call this episode.
Yeah, it's such a good point about it being a role model thing as well, because Travis Kelce, he's the best at his position in the league. He's been one of the best for his entire career. He's the highest paid tight end in the league in history. He gets paid, I think it's $30 million a year, and he does. He's got commercials and sponsorships and all that stuff. Taylor Swift is a billionaire. She has so much more money than him, and her audience will be even bigger than his. She has more power and more resources and more fame in every way than he does, and it makes no difference to him whatsoever. Footballers are the biggest manly tough guys there are, and he's with this woman who's, for all intent, like on paper, is far more successful than him. And to just see a man this big butch manly man just be happy with someone. That just shows that men just relax. Men need to just chill out and not worry that they're going to be culled by feminists.
Honest.
Wow, there you go. We have taken some turns in this episode, and I think they are definitely interesting points. I think it's so interesting when we talk about how broad we can go with our definition of magic, and I think, influence and the power for positive influence is definitely a good one to end on, for sure. Does anyone else have anything they want to add before we bid everybody farewell for this episode about witches and gaming?
No, but I think we should be. I think we should be looking and actively supporting more positive kind of experience of older women and wise women and nature loving women, because it was when we were talking about how we have this very narrow area age range within which women are allowed to be. And I think what's really crazy about that is that the reality is that the older women are there to support the younger women in the various things of stages of their life and the younger society. So these days in many homes and families, it's the grandparents are doing at least some of the childcare, at least some of the supporting, and so there is a huge value in that, and a huge value in the knowledge and the experience and all of that comes with age. And I do think that there is a growing body of women who are coming to menopause and are recognizing that once they have passed that sort of fertile time in their life, that they then come into another time that is equally as fertile, just in a very different way, and that there is a time when actually they can bring a lot to the party, and we live in a world of such strong cult of youth that reinforcing this idea of the sort of crone, the evil witch, this sort of constant undermining of female power is not actually good for anyone, because the boys that are playing these games and sort of thinking, oh, only pretty women are worth anything and old women are evil witches, they're going home, their nana's making them their dinner, for goodness sakes. We have to recognize that these ideas of what makes people up, when they're presented in a computer game, they go into people's heads and they impact their views of the world. And I hope that we can kind of continue to move in a more positive direction and a more rounded direction. So sorry, I just needed to have that.
No, it's great. Thank you.
I think that's a really another important thing, is that as the generations of women move forward, recognizing that once you hit 42, everything they've been told is just wait to die then. That's it. Nothing else. Just gonna sit back and nothing else can happen to me. I can't be anything else from now on. But as these generations go on, and hopefully, if there's another problem with how society has been for a long time and how we're still trying to dig our way out of it, is that women you could choose, you could have your career or you could have kids, and then there'll be people who early 20s starting a job and then going, okay, I'm going to have a family, and because there isn't any child support that can allow me to do both in as full a way as possible, then you see that happen to women, and then they might think, "Oh well, I'm in my 40s now, and the kids have left home. Just what do I do now? I'm not. There's nothing that I'm supposed to be doing because everything that I'm supposed to do, I've done." Rather than thinking it's it's you can do anything with that time. There's no restrictions on what you can do apart from if you've got physical restrictions. There is nothing you cannot learn. There is no skill you can't develop. You could do anything with your time that you choose. Just getting women to recognize that within themselves, I think that's another area of patriarchal conditioning where it might be difficult. I can imagine it being very difficult for women reaching that age where they disappear from view in society, to recognize that their value is not based on how society treats them. Their value is an inherent thing that they can dictate themselves. And then I think thinking of just the future, there's always there are different kinds of fertility forever. You can be 90 and start a new skill, for example, and we'll talk about gaming. You could reach 90 and decide, I'm going to use my pension to buy an Xbox. I don't know which one to start with, so I'll get an Xbox, a PC, and a PlayStation. Because who has all of the disposable income and all of the free time? Retired people.
So
why
true.
aren't game designers
Some
going?
of them might disagree.
They might, yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah,
It's just
an untapped audience.
that gets to me. So
Yes.
yeah.
Well, thank you both again for another brilliant episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please give it a like and share it with your friends. Let us know what you thought. If you have any thoughts to share, any gaming witches that we've missed out, let us know. You can find us on all your podcast apps and on YouTube as well. We have new episodes every Thursday, and you can also sign up to our Patreon if you'd like to support us in making more lovely content for you. Thank you very much, and we'll be back soon. Bye.
Bye.